When you first lay eyes on the Škoda RSO, your brain struggles to categorize it. It's not quite a truck, not quite a tank, not quite anything you've seen before. It looks less like something that rolled off a production line and more like something that escaped from a factory where engineers were handed one instruction: build something that can go anywhere, and were told very firmly not to worry about how it looks. They did not worry about how it looks. The first thing that grabs you, and it always grabs you, are the wheels. Not tires, wheels. Massive, bare steel discs ringed with aggressive metal cleats, each one looking like the offspring of a tractor and a medieval siege engine. They don't just look unusual, they look almost confrontational, like the machine itself is daring the ground beneath it to try something. If you saw this thing rolling toward you without context, you'd assume it was built to crush terrain rather than drive over it. But behind that bizarre silhouette was a genuine crisis. By the early 1940s, the German army had collided with one of the most brutal realities of warfare on the Eastern Front: the terrain. Mud that swallowed vehicles whole, snow that turned roads into traps, ground that was less a surface and more a suggestion. Standard trucks didn't struggle in these conditions. They failed, they sank, they froze, they simply refused to move. And an army that can't move its artillery is an army with a very serious problem. So the brief was simple, even if the solution wasn't: build a machine that simply doesn't care. The engineering team behind the RSO was associated with Ferdinand Porsche, which should immediately tell you the solution wasn't going to be conventional. Rather than going the obvious route with tracks, they went in a completely different direction: enormous steel wheels, all-wheel drive. The reasoning was sound. Large diameter wheels, roughly 5 feet across, would roll over obstacles that would swallow smaller ones. Steel construction meant durability where rubber would fail. Cleats meant traction. Full-time four-wheel drive meant no wheel was ever just along for the ride. On paper, it was brilliant. Under the hood sat a massive inline four-cylinder gasoline engine, displacing approximately 366 cubic inches and producing around 90 horsepower at low reps. And that was entirely deliberate. This wasn't a machine chasing speed. It was chasing torque, steady, relentless pulling power capable of hauling heavy artillery through conditions that would stop anything else cold. The engine was air-cooled, again by design. In extreme cold, liquid cooling systems could freeze, crack, or fail catastrophically. Air cooling meant fewer vulnerabilities, fewer failure points, and, in theory, a more reliable machine in the environments it was built for. But here's the detail that really stops you. To start the engine, the RSO used a completely separate two-cylinder auxiliary starter engine, and this wasn't some small add-on bolted to the side as an afterthought. It was essentially half of the main engine, a dedicated mechanical system whose sole job was getting the primary power plant running. It sounds overcomplicated, and it kind of was, but in brutal winter conditions where conventional ignition systems could become completely useless, it was seen as a robust, dependable solution. It's the kind of detail that makes you pause. This wasn't just a vehicle, it was a stack of engineering solutions, each one addressing a specific problem, layered on top of each other until something that could theoretically function in places where nothing else could. Power ran through a 5-speed manual transmission with additional reduction gearing, giving the driver the ability to move slowly but with enormous force. All 4 wheels were driven. Differential locks were included to claw back traction when conditions got brutal, which for this machine was essentially always. And now the number that stops every conversation. The RSO's top speed was approximately 10 miles per hour. 10. You could walk faster over short distances. The machine wasn't designed to arrive quickly. It was designed to eventually arrive, no matter how long it took, no matter what stood between it and the destination. Slow, deliberate, unstoppable. That was the promise.
Steering, however, told a different story. Mechanically, it was conventional. A steering wheel connected through linkage to the front axle, turning the wheels. No power assistance, no modern conveniences, just raw mechanical effort against a machine weighing over 15,000 pounds, riding on enormous steel wheels. On firm ground, it was manageable. Demanding, but manageable. On mud or ice, it became something else entirely. The steel wheels, despite their aggressive appearance, didn't always grip the way you'd expect. In the wrong conditions, the RSO could begin to slide rather than turn, giving the driver the deeply uncomfortable sensation that the machine had developed its own opinion about where it was going. And once something of that mass decided to lose momentum in the middle of deep mud, the conversation about getting it moving again was neither short nor pleasant. Suspension was leaf springs on solid axles, front and rear, rugged, proven, and utterly indifferent to comfort. The cab itself was partially wood-framed with a canvas roof, functional protection against the elements, nothing more. The large steering wheel dominated the driving position. It wasn't a place you'd choose to spend hours. In wartime, you rarely got to choose. But the RSO's most damaging flaw wasn't the weight, the speed, or the steering. It was fuel consumption. Under normal operating conditions, the machine managed roughly 2.3 miles per gallon, already poor by any standard. But off-road, in the very conditions it was designed to conquer, consumption could explode to around 0.4 miles per gallon. That's approximately 600 liters per 100 kilometers. At that point, you aren't just operating a vehicle, you are feeding it, constantly, voraciously, in a wartime environment where fuel logistics were already stretched to breaking point. That number explains everything. Just over 200 units were built between 1942 and 1944, a machine designed to solve a massive front-wide problem, produced in numbers that barely registered. And despite being conceived specifically for the Eastern Front, it saw more use elsewhere, a quiet admission that in practice it was too heavy, too slow, too thirsty, and ultimately less capable in extreme conditions than the engineers had hoped. And yet, the Škoda RSO refuses to be written off as simply a failure, because what it actually represents is something more interesting than success or failure. It represents an idea, the conviction that a hard enough problem approached boldly enough, with enough willingness to reject the obvious answer, could be solved. The engineers looked at roads that defeated conventional vehicles and said, what if we didn't need roads at all? Did it work perfectly? No. Was it a failure? Not entirely. It was an experiment, ambitious, flawed, and fascinating. And like the best experiments, what it revealed was almost as valuable as what it was trying to prove. Because without machines like this one, without engineers willing to bolt a starter engine onto a starter engine and fit 5-foot steel wheels to a military tractor and send it into the worst terrain in the world just to see what happens, progress doesn't happen. The most unusual vehicles are rarely the most successful ones, but they are almost always the ones with the most interesting stories to tell. If that kind of story is what you're here for, subscribe. There's a lot more coming, and some of them are even stranger than this.